Sir, you're under arrest for impersonating a military officer. Detective Adrian Knox's voice cut through the busy downtown intersection as midday traffic slowed to watch the scene unfold. General Leonard Shaw stood at attention in his pristine dress uniform, the afternoon sun reflecting off his polished brass and ribbons earned through decades of service. Knox's short-sleeved patrol uniform was already dark with sweat as he approached with backup officers flanking him. "Where'd you buy the outfit, eBay?" Knox's words carried to the growing crowd of onlookers with their phones raised. Real generals don't walk around in costume unless it's Halloween. The general's voice remained calm, despite the handcuffs clicking around his wrists. "Detective, I'm General Shaw from Fort Braxton. Call the Pentagon verification line." Knox pushed him toward the patrol car, enjoying the audience. "The only thing I'm calling is a psychiatric evaluation for whoever thinks this act is convincing. Welcome to Frost Folktales. This is where we tell the stories of those who were underestimated, dismissed, and targeted, yet chose courage over silence. If these stories move you, subscribe and be part of a community that refuses to let them fade into the background." The crowd of pedestrians and stopped drivers grew larger as Detective Adrian Knox's voice echoed off the glass buildings surrounding the intersection. General Leonard Shaw maintained perfect military posture, even with his hands secured behind his back. His dark green dress jacket, adorned with 3 decades of earned decorations, catching the bright overhead sunlight. Each ribbon told a story of service, sacrifice, and honor that Knox dismissed with a sneer. "You people will try anything these days," Knox muttered loud enough for bystanders to hear. "Probably thinks if he dresses up fancy enough, someone will give him money or special treatment." A woman in red clothing stepped closer, her phone recording as she called out, "Officer, that uniform looks real to me. Those medals aren't plastic." Knox whirled around, his face flushed with irritation. "Ma'am, step back. This is police business. Anyone can order military costumes online. Hell, I could dress up like the president tomorrow. Doesn't make it legal." General Shaw's voice cut through the tension with practiced authority. "Detective Knox, I understand your skepticism, but a simple phone call to Fort Braxton will confirm my identity. I'm scheduled to speak at a military ceremony in 20 minutes. The crowd murmured as his dignified response contrasted sharply with Knox's aggressive demeanor. Knox's radio crackled as he called for backup, his eyes never leaving the general's face. "This is Detective Knox requesting additional units downtown. I've got a suspect impersonating military personnel, possible mental health issue." The general closed his eyes briefly, recognizing the trap being set around him. "Detective, my identification is in my jacket pocket. My military ID clearly shows my rank and authorization." Knox laughed, the sound harsh against the urban backdrop. "Your fake ID, right next to your fake medals and your fake rank. Nice try, buddy." A businessman in an orange shirt pushed through the crowd, his voice rising with indignation. "Officer, I'm a veteran. That man's bearing, his uniform details, everything about him screams authentic military. You can't just arrest someone for wearing their own uniform." Knox's jaw tightened as more voices joined in support of the general. The detective's authority was being questioned publicly, and his response grew more defensive and aggressive. "I don't care what you think you see. Military impersonation is a federal crime, and this guy's about to learn that lesson the hard way." General Shaw stood silent for a moment, processing the situation with the strategic mind that had served him through 3 decades of military leadership. "Detective Knox, I've served my country for 30 years. I've commanded troops in combat zones, briefed presidents, and earned every decoration on this uniform. All I ask is that you verify my identity before proceeding." His calm rationality only seemed to inflame Knox further. "Save the speech for someone who cares. Real military officers don't need to walk around proving themselves to civilians." The crowd's phones captured every word as Knox's language became more heated. A young woman stepped forward, her red top bright against the business district backdrop. "Sir, I called Fort Braxton. They confirmed they have a General Shaw scheduled for a ceremony today." Knox snatched her phone away. "You didn't call anyone, lady. And even if you did, anyone can claim to be anyone over the phone. This whole thing could be an elaborate setup." Lieutenant Curtis Payne's patrol car arrived with lights flashing, adding to the spectacle, drawing more curious onlookers. Payne stepped out, his long-sleeved uniform crisp despite the afternoon heat, and immediately assessed the scene with growing concern. "Knox, what's the situation here?" His backup officer's question came with professional courtesy, but underlying doubt was evident in his tone. Knox gestured broadly at General Shaw. "Military impersonation. Guy thinks he's some kind of general, but look at him. Probably homeless, probably delusional." Payne studied General Shaw's uniform more carefully, noting details that Knox had dismissed. The ribbons were arranged in perfect military order, the brass polished to regulation standards, and the man's bearing spoke of genuine military discipline. "Detective Knox, those decorations look authentic to me. Maybe we should make that verification call before proceeding further." Knox's face darkened with anger at having his judgment questioned by his own backup. "I don't need a phone call to spot a fake. Lieutenant, this arrest is happening." The general spoke directly to Lieutenant Payne, his voice carrying the authority of command even in handcuffs. "Lieutenant, I'm General Leonard Shaw, assigned to Fort Braxton. I've served tours in Afghanistan, Iraq, and classified operations I cannot discuss. My service record can be verified through proper military channels. Detective Knox has refused multiple requests to confirm my identity." Payne's expression shifted as the gravity of the potential mistake became clear. "Knox, if this man really is military, especially high-ranking military, this arrest could create serious problems for the department." Knox stepped between Payne and the general, his authority challenged and his pride wounded. "I don't care if he thinks he's George Washington himself. Nobody walks around downtown in military drag without consequences." The crowd's reaction grew more hostile as Knox's disrespect became more apparent. Multiple voices called out in the general's defense, creating a volatile situation that drew even more attention from passing traffic and pedestrians. A man in a blue jacket, who identified himself as a veteran, pushed to the front of the crowd. "Officer, I served under general rank officers. This man's posture, his bearing, even the way he speaks, commands respect. You're making a huge mistake." Knox's response came with a string of words that made the crowd gasp and several people to start shouting in anger. The detective's mask slipped completely as racial epithets mixed with his growing frustration at the public challenge to his authority. General Shaw's reaction to the slurs was a slight stiffening of his already perfect posture, but his voice remained steady and professional. "Detective Knox, your language is inappropriate and unprofessional. I maintain my request for identity verification through proper military channels." His dignity under assault impressed the crowd while highlighting Knox's loss of control. Payne stepped closer to Knox, his voice low but urgent. "Detective, you need to dial this back right now. We've got dozens of people recording this, and your language is way out of line." Knox ignored his backup officer's warning, focused entirely on forcing the general into submission. "Get in the car now, or I'll add resisting arrest to the charges." When General Shaw moved toward the patrol car with measured steps, maintaining his military bearing despite the humiliation, the crowd's anger reached a boiling point. Shouts of injustice and demands for the detective's badge number filled the air as phones continued recording every moment of the encounter. The general paused at the car door, turning to address the crowd with the same dignity he'd shown throughout the ordeal. "Thank you all for your support. The truth will emerge, and justice will be served." His words carried the weight of someone accustomed to command and confident in eventual vindication. Knox shoved him roughly into the back seat, his actions captured by dozens of cameras as the crowd pressed closer with growing agitation. Lieutenant Payne made one final attempt to reason with his partner as they prepared to transport their prisoner. "Knox, I really think we should verify his identity before we book him. If he's really military, especially general rank, this is going to explode in our faces." Knox slammed the car door and turned to face the hostile crowd. "I don't care who he thinks he is. Impersonation is impersonation, and nobody gets special treatment because they dress up fancy." As the patrol car pulled away from the intersection, General Leonard Shaw sat in the back seat with perfect military posture, his mind already working through the chain of events his arrest would trigger once his absence from the ceremony was noted. The crowd remained agitated long after the car disappeared, their phones still recording as they discussed what they'd witnessed. Lieutenant Payne followed in his own vehicle, knowing that Detective Knox had just made the biggest mistake of his career. while Knox himself drove toward the station convinced he'd just arrested another delusional street person in an elaborate costume. The afternoon sun continued to shine brightly over the downtown intersection, where a decorated general had been arrested for the crime of wearing his own uniform, setting in motion events that would shake the police department to its foundation and expose years of systemic problems that had been hidden too long in the shadows. The harsh fluorescent lights of Riverside Police Station cast everything in stark white illumination as Detective Adrian Knox's patrol car pulled into the booking area. Through the reinforced glass windows, natural skylight filtered down from the overhead skylights, creating an almost clinical atmosphere in the processing bay. General Leonard Shaw sat motionless in the back seat, his decorated dress uniform still immaculate despite the handcuffs cutting into his wrists behind his back. Sergeant Mildred Horton looked up from her desk as the doors opened. A middle-aged black woman with 23 years on the force. She wore the standard blue police jacket over her orange administrative top and navy pants. Her weathered face had seen every type of arrest come through these doors. But when Detective Adrian Knox roughly guided General Leonard Shaw inside, something made her pause. The man in handcuffs carried himself with a dignity that seemed to fill the room, his posture military straight despite his restraints. "What do we have here, Knox?" Sergeant Mildred Horton asked, her fingers hovering over the booking computer keyboard. Her eyes swept over General Leonard Shaw's uniform, taking in the rows of ribbons, the gleaming stars on his shoulders, the expert tailoring that spoke of authentic military issue. Detective Adrian Knox, still wearing his short-sleeved uniform shirt and tactical pants, pushed General Leonard Shaw forward with unnecessary force. Military impersonator. Caught him downtown trying to con people with this elaborate costume. Look at all this fake hardware he's got pinned on there. General Leonard Shaw maintained his composure, though his jaw tightened slightly. "Sergeant, I am General Leonard Shaw, United States Army. I was walking to the Veterans Memorial Ceremony when this officer arrested me without cause. I've requested to verify my identity, but Detective Knox has refused." Sergeant Mildred Horton's eyebrows rose as she studied the uniform more closely. The fabric quality, the precise placement of decorations, the way they caught the overhead fluorescent lighting, everything looked authentic to her experienced eye. She'd processed plenty of military impersonators over the years, and their costumes never had this level of detail or craftsmanship. "Dux, did you run any verification on his identity?" she asked, fingers still not moving toward the keyboard. Detective Adrian Knox laughed, the sound echoing off the concrete walls under the bright skylights. "Come on, Horton. Look at this guy. You really think the Army would make someone like him a general? This is the most elaborate con I've ever seen." He turned to General Leonard Shaw with a sneer. "Nice try with the act, but you're not fooling anyone in here." As Detective Adrian Knox spoke, two other officers entered the processing area. Officer Rick Donnelly, wearing his green patrol top and blue jacket, stopped mid-conversation when he saw General Leonard Shaw's uniform. Officer Janet Morse, her red blouse visible under her standard blue police jacket with black tactical pants, actually took a step back. "Jesus, Knox," Officer Rick Donnelly whispered. "Those decorations look real. That's a bronze star, a purple heart. And is that a Distinguished Service Cross?" Detective Adrian Knox waved dismissively. "It's all fake. High-quality fake, but fake nonetheless. This guy probably spent thousands putting together this costume. Hell, he might even believe he's really a general. We might be looking at a mental health case here." General Leonard Shaw turned to face Detective Adrian Knox directly, his voice remaining calm but carrying unmistakable authority. "Detective Knox, I am requesting my constitutional right to a phone call. I need to contact Fort Braxton immediately to verify my identity and inform my command of this situation." "Not so fast, General Fake," Detective Adrian Knox replied mockingly. "I think we need to get you a psychiatric evaluation first. Make sure you're not a danger to yourself or others with these delusions of military grandeur." The injustice of the situation was becoming more apparent to everyone in the booking area. Sergeant Mildred Horton exchanged glances with the other officers, her discomfort growing by the minute. The man before them didn't act like any impersonator she'd ever encountered. His bearing, his vocabulary, even the way he wore the uniform suggested deep familiarity with military protocol. Just then, Dr. Carlton Briggs emerged from the interview rooms down the hallway. The black military psychiatrist wore an orange button-down shirt under a blue civilian jacket with dark slacks, his bearing immediately recognizable as former military. He'd been at the station evaluating another case when the commotion drew his attention. Dr. Carlton Briggs stopped cold when he saw General Leonard Shaw. His trained eye immediately assessed the man's posture, the authentic military bearing that couldn't be faked, the precise way the uniform was worn. More importantly, he recognized several of the decorations from his own time serving in Army psychiatric services. "Excuse me," Dr. Carlton Briggs said, approaching the group. "I couldn't help but notice the discussion. I'm Dr. Carlton Briggs, military psychiatrist. That uniform and those decorations appear completely authentic from my professional observation." Detective Adrian Knox spun around, his face flushing with irritation. "Great, another bleeding heart. Doctor, this man is clearly suffering from delusions. He's convinced himself he's actually an Army general." Dr. Carlton Briggs studied General Leonard Shaw more closely, noting the man's calm demeanor, the way he stood at modified attention even in handcuffs, the subtle signs that indicated genuine military conditioning. "Sir, if I may ask, what's your unit designation and current assignment?" General Leonard Shaw met his eyes directly. "I'm currently assigned to Pentagon Strategic Planning, attached to the Joint Chiefs Advisory Committee. My unit history includes command of the 82nd Airborne Division and deployment leadership in classified theater operations." The specificity and confidence of the response made Dr. Carlton Briggs nod slowly. These weren't the vague claims of someone with delusions or the rehearsed lies of an impersonator. The details were too precise, delivered too naturally. Heavy footsteps echoed down the hallway as Captain Lucia Delgado approached. The middle-aged Latina supervisor wore her green administrative top under the regulation blue captain's jacket, with navy pants, her face stern under the harsh overhead lighting. She'd heard about the arrest over the radio and came to assess the situation personally. "Knox, what exactly do we have here?" Captain Lucia Delgado demanded, her eyes sweeping over the scene. "I've been reviewing your incident report, and I'm not seeing any actual criminal activity listed. What specific crime did this man commit?" Detective Adrian Knox straightened defensively. "Military impersonation, Captain. It's a federal offense to wear that uniform without authorization. But did you verify whether he has authorization?" Captain Lucia Delgado pressed. "Did you check his identification? Contact any military authorities? Run any background checks?" The questions hung in the air, like the bright fluorescent lighting above them, illuminating the gaps in Detective Adrian Knox's procedure. General Leonard Shaw remained silent, letting the captain's inquiries speak for themselves. "I didn't need to verify anything," Detective Adrian Knox insisted. "It's obvious this is fake. Look at him, Captain. Use your common sense." Captain Lucia Delgado's expression darkened. "Detective Knox, look at him, is not grounds for arrest. Officer Shannon Voss called me with concerns about your conduct during the arrest. She said you used inappropriate language and refused to follow standard verification procedures." Dr. Carlton Briggs stepped forward. "Captain, as a military psychiatrist with 15 years of service, I can professionally attest that this gentleman displays authentic military bearing and knowledge consistent with senior officer rank. His responses to military-specific questions are immediate and accurate." The room fell silent, except for the humming of the overhead fluorescent fixtures. Sergeant Mildred Horton finally spoke up, her voice careful but firm. "Captain, in 23 years of processing arrests, I've never seen military decorations this authentic on an impersonator. The uniform quality, the precise placement of insignia, even the way it's tailored, suggests legitimate issue." General Leonard Shaw seized the moment. "Captain Delgado, I can recite my complete service record, including classified operation details that only someone with appropriate clearance would know. I can provide specific names, dates, and locations of deployments that can be immediately verified through Pentagon channels." Detective Adrian Knox laughed harshly. He's had years to research this stuff online. Anyone can memorize military history and make up convincing lies. "Then let me prove it." General Leonard Shaw replied calmly. "I served as liaison officer for Operation Silent Thunder In 2019, a classified joint operation coordinating with special forces units in undisclosed locations. I can provide operation codes, personnel rosters, and strategic details that aren't available in any public record. Dr. Carlton Briggs's eyes widened. He'd heard whispers of Operation Silent Thunder during his own Pentagon rotations, but details were strictly compartmentalized. No civilian, no matter how dedicated to research, could access that level of classified information. That operation is above top-secret classification, Dr. Carlton Briggs said quietly. There's no way a civilian impersonator could know those details. Captain Lucia Delgado turned to Detective Adrian Knox, her expression increasingly stern under the bright overhead lighting. Knox, you arrested this man without verification, refused his requests for identification checks, and ignored standard procedures. Even if he were an impersonator, which seems increasingly unlikely, your conduct has been completely inappropriate. Detective Adrian Knox's face reddened with anger and embarrassment. Fine. You want to be fooled by this elaborate con. That's your choice. But I'm telling you, this whole thing is fake. The uniform, the attitude, all of it. He's probably some homeless veteran who found this stuff in a surplus store and convinced himself he's actually important. The cruel dismissal hung in the air like the harsh fluorescent glare, but it only served to highlight Detective Adrian Knox's growing isolation. Everyone else in the booking area was beginning to see what he refused to acknowledge. Officer Shannon Voss appeared in the doorway, her red patrol blouse visible under her blue jacket as natural skylight illuminated her concerned expression. Captain, I need to speak with you about Detective Knox's conduct during the arrest. I witnessed several procedural violations and inappropriate comments. Captain Lucia Delgado nodded grimly. Knox, I want you to grant this man his phone call immediately. No more delays, no more excuses, and I want a full written report on my desk, explaining every aspect of this arrest. As the various authority figures aligned against Detective Adrian Knox's position, General Leonard Shaw maintained his dignified silence, knowing that truth and justice were finally beginning to emerge from the harsh light of scrutiny. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead in the police station processing area as General Leonard Shaw stood with quiet dignity beside the payphone mounted on the beige concrete wall. The afternoon sunlight streamed through the high windows, casting long shadows across the polished linoleum floor. His dress uniform remained immaculate despite the ordeal, the rows of ribbons and medals catching the natural light filtering down from above. Sergeant Mildred Horton unlocked his handcuffs with visible reluctance, her weathered face showing the strain of processing an arrest she increasingly doubted. Her blue police shirt was pressed and crisp, her dark pants bearing the sharp creases of military precision she recognized in the man before her. "You have 10 minutes, sir," she said quietly, emphasizing the last word in a way that suggested her growing respect. Her gray hair was pulled back in a regulation bun, and her eyes held the wisdom of someone who had seen enough genuine military bearing to recognize it. General Leonard Shaw nodded graciously and lifted the receiver, his movements deliberate and controlled. He dialed the direct line to the Pentagon, a number he had memorized decades ago during his first assignment to military intelligence. The phone rang twice before a familiar voice answered. "Colonel Ramsey, Pentagon Military Personnel Division." "Howard, this is Leonard Shaw. I need immediate assistance." The line went silent for several seconds. Colonel Howard Ramsey's voice, when it returned, carried a mixture of relief and confusion. "General Shaw, sir, we've been trying to reach you for the past 2 hours. You missed the ceremony briefing, and your aide said you never arrived at Fort Braxton. Where are you?" General Leonard Shaw's voice remained steady despite the humiliation he had endured. "I'm currently detained at the downtown municipal police station. I was arrested approximately 3 hours ago while walking to the ceremony." "Arrested?" Colonel Howard Ramsey's voice rose sharply. "Sir, what are the charges? This has to be some kind of mistake. The charges are impersonating a military officer and public disturbance. The arresting officer, Detective Adrian Knox, claims my uniform and decorations are fraudulent." General Leonard Shaw spoke with the precise diction that had commanded respect in briefing rooms across 3 decades of service. Colonel Howard Ramsey's keyboard clicked rapidly in the background. "Sir, I'm pulling up the emergency protocols now. This is completely unacceptable. I'm initiating immediate contact with the local police chief and federal oversight. Can you give me the exact location and the name of the supervising officer? Across the processing area, Detective Adrian Knox hunched over his desk. His short-sleeved blue uniform shirt wrinkled from the afternoon's activities. His dark pants bore coffee stains, and his face showed the satisfied smirk of someone convinced of his own righteousness. He was filling out paperwork with deliberate slowness, occasionally glancing toward General Leonard Shaw with undisguised contempt. Captain Lucia Delgado approached Detective Adrian Knox's desk, her long-sleeved blue uniform shirt bearing the insignia of her rank. Her black pants were perfectly pressed, and her dark hair was pulled back in a professional ponytail. Her expression carried the weight of growing concern as she reviewed the arrest report. "Knox, I've been going over your paperwork, and I have serious questions about this arrest," she said, her voice carrying the authority of command. "The suspect's uniform appears authentic, and his knowledge of military protocol is extensive. Have you verified his identity through proper channels?" Detective Adrian Knox looked up with irritation. His pale face flushed from the afternoon's confrontation. "Captain, I told you, this guy is running some kind of elaborate con. These stolen valor cases are getting more sophisticated. He probably bought the uniform online and memorized some military facts. The decorations alone would cost thousands of dollars to replicate accurately," Captain Lucia Delgado replied, pulling out a magnifying glass to examine photos of General Leonard Shaw's ribbons. "And his bearing, his speech patterns, his responses to questioning, they're all consistent with genuine military leadership." Dr. Carlton Briggs approached from the side corridor, his green professional shirt and dark slacks marking him as civilian personnel. The military psychiatrist carried himself with the quiet confidence of someone accustomed to making crucial assessments under pressure. His medical bag was slung over his shoulder, and his expression was thoughtful. "Captain Delgado, I completed my evaluation of the other case, but I couldn't help observing the gentleman by the phone," Dr. Carlton Briggs said, adjusting his wire-rimmed glasses. "In my professional opinion, that man displays authentic command presence that cannot be faked or learned through casual study." Captain Lucia Delgado turned toward him with interest. "What makes you so certain, Doctor? 20 years of evaluating military personnel teaches you to recognize genuine leadership qualities," Dr. Carlton Briggs explained, his voice carrying the weight of professional expertise. His posture, his eye contact patterns, his response to stress, his respectful but authoritative interaction with your sergeant, these are behaviors that develop over decades of command responsibility. At the phone, General Leonard Shaw continued his conversation with Colonel Howard Ramsey, providing the detailed information requested by Pentagon emergency protocols. The facility is the downtown municipal station at 12047 Commerce Street. The supervising officer appears to be Captain Lucia Delgado, though she was not involved in the arrest itself. "Sir, I'm activating Emergency Response Protocol 7, Colonel Howard Ramsey said, his typing becoming more rapid. "I'm contacting FBI agent Diana Rowe at the Federal Civil Rights Division, and I'm calling General Francis Loomis immediately. This is a potential federal incident involving a flag rank officer." "Howard, I need you to understand something," General Leonard Shaw said, lowering his voice slightly. "This officer displayed clear racial animus during the arrest. He used derogatory language and dismissed my attempts at identification based on what appeared to be racial profiling." The line went quiet again before Colonel Howard Ramsey responded with barely controlled anger. "Sir, that information changes this from an administrative error to a potential federal civil rights violation. I'm elevating this to the highest priority and involving the Justice Department." Detective Adrian Knox stood up from his desk, stretching with the casual arrogance of someone convinced the situation was under control. His badge gleamed under the fluorescent lights as he walked toward Captain Lucia Delgado and Dr. Carlton Briggs. "Captain, I hope you're not letting this con artist get in your head," Detective Adrian Knox said, his voice carrying a mocking tone. "These guys are getting better at their performances, but he's still just a criminal in a costume." Dr. Carlton Briggs turned toward Detective Adrian Knox with professional coolness. "Detective, I've spent 2 decades evaluating military personnel for psychological fitness and leadership capability. That gentleman displays command presence that develops only through years of genuine military leadership responsibility. And I've spent 15 years on the street dealing with every kind of fraud and deception, Detective Adrian Knox retorted, his pale face growing redder. You psychiatrists always fall for a good act. Captain Lucia Delgado held up her hand for silence as her desk phone rang. She answered with crisp professionalism. Captain Delgado, Downtown Municipal Police. Captain, this is Colonel Howard Ramsey calling from the Pentagon regarding one of our officers currently in your custody. We show General Leonard Shaw detained at your facility. Captain Lucia Delgado's eyes widened as she looked toward General Leonard Shaw at the payphone. Colonel, are you saying that man is actually a general? Ma'am, General Shaw is a flag rank officer with 30 years of distinguished service. He holds top secret clearance and was scheduled for a ceremony at Fort Braxton this afternoon. His detention represents a serious incident requiring immediate federal attention. Detective Adrian Knox had been listening to the conversation, and his expression shifted from confidence to defensive anger. This is all part of the con, Captain. These people set up elaborate networks to support their fraudulent claims. Dr. Carlton Briggs shook his head with professional certainty. Detective Knox, the Pentagon doesn't participate in civilian fraud schemes. If they're confirming his identity, then your arrest was a serious mistake. General Leonard Shaw completed his call and replaced the receiver, turning toward the group with the same dignified composure he had maintained throughout the ordeal. Sergeant Mildred Horton approached with handcuffs, but Captain Lucia Delgado held up her hand. Sergeant, hold off on restraining him for now. We're receiving verification from the Pentagon that may change the situation significantly. Detective Adrian Knox stepped forward aggressively, his face now showing the first signs of concern beneath his continued arrogance. Captain, with all due respect, you're being manipulated by a sophisticated criminal operation. The Pentagon confirmation could be fake, part of an elaborate identity theft scheme. Detective Knox, I've been in law enforcement for 18 years, Captain Lucia Delgado replied firmly. The Pentagon doesn't make verification calls as part of civilian fraud schemes. Dr. Briggs's professional assessment supports the authenticity of this man's military background. General Leonard Shaw approached the group with measured steps, his dress uniform pristine despite hours of detention. The afternoon sunlight continued streaming through the high windows, illuminating the authentic military decorations that had sparked the entire controversy. Captain Delgado, I appreciate your professionalism during this difficult situation, General Leonard Shaw said, his voice carrying the quiet authority that had commanded respect in military councils worldwide. I understand that verification processes must be thorough, but I hope we can resolve this matter quickly. Detective Adrian Knox's jaw tightened as he watched the dynamic shifting around him. This is exactly what these con artists do. They remain calm and professional while their networks provide false verification. I'm not backing down from this arrest. Dr. Carlton Briggs observed the interaction with the keen eye of someone trained to assess psychological responses under stress. Detective, your continued insistence in the face of mounting contrary evidence suggests emotional investment in the arrest beyond professional duty. The tension in the processing area continued building as federal wheels began turning in response to General Leonard Shaw's phone call. The contrast between Detective Adrian Knox's defensive arrogance and General Leonard Shaw's dignified patience became more pronounced with each passing moment. Captain Lucia Delgado's phone rang again, and she answered with growing apprehension about the situation her department now faced. The afternoon sunlight continued streaming through the windows, casting everything in the harsh clarity that would soon illuminate the full scope of Detective Adrian Knox's mistake. The wheels of military justice had begun turning, and General Leonard Shaw waited with the patient confidence of someone who knew that truth and institutional power were now aligning in his favor. The secure line at the Pentagon crackled with urgency as Colonel Howard Ramsey's fingers moved rapidly across his keyboard, pulling up classified personnel files. His green military dress shirt was crisp despite the early morning hour, and fluorescent lights illuminated the situation room where he worked. The weight of what he'd learned from General Leonard Shaw's phone call demanded immediate action at the highest levels of military command. General Frances Loomis sat behind her mahogany desk, her red blazer, immaculate as she reviewed the preliminary report. Colonel Howard Ramsey had rushed to her office. Natural light streamed through the Pentagon's windows, casting sharp shadows across the documents that detailed the impossible situation unfolding in a civilian police station hundreds of miles away. Her 3-star insignia caught the morning sun as she reached for her secure phone. "Colonel Ramsey, walk me through this again," General Frances Loomis said, her voice carrying the authority of 35 years in military service. "You're telling me that General Leonard Shaw, one of our most decorated officers, is sitting in a municipal jail cell because some detective thinks he's impersonating a soldier?" Colonel Howard Ramsey straightened his posture, his muscular frame filling out his green dress uniform, as he consulted his notes. "Ma'am, General Shaw contacted me approximately 40 minutes ago. He was arrested while walking to the Veterans Memorial Ceremony downtown. The arresting officer, Detective Adrian Knox, refused to verify his credentials and processed him for impersonation of a military officer." The implications hit General Frances Loomis like a tactical missile. She knew General Leonard Shaw's record better than almost anyone in the Pentagon. His classified operations in 3 different combat zones, his role in developing counter-terrorism strategies that remained state secrets, his reputation as a soldier's general who'd earned respect from enlisted personnel and flag officers alike. The idea that such a man would be handcuffed and humiliated on a public street sent rage coursing through her veins. "Initiate Emergency Protocol 7, General Frances Loomis commanded, her red blazer moving as she stood and began pacing. "Contact the FBI's Civil Rights Division immediately. If a decorated general can be arrested and degraded because of his skin color, we have a national security issue on our hands." Meanwhile, FBI agent Diana Rowe was reviewing case files in her Washington office when her secure phone rang with the distinctive tone that indicated Pentagon priority traffic. Her red pantsuit was professional, yet commanding as she answered, already sensing that her day was about to take a dramatic turn. The fluorescent lighting in her federal building office created an atmosphere of serious business as she listened to the extraordinary briefing. "Agent Rowe, this is Colonel Ramsey at the Pentagon," the voice said with military precision. "We have a potential federal civil rights violation involving one of our highest-ranking officers. I'm transmitting classified background information that will demonstrate the severity of this situation." As Diana Rowe's computer received the encrypted files, her expression shifted from professional interest to shocked disbelief. General Leonard Shaw's service record read like a catalog of American military excellence. Bronze Star with Valor Device, Purple Heart, Distinguished Service Medal, combat deployments that spanned decades of military conflicts. His security clearance level was so high that even she, as a senior FBI agent, couldn't access certain operational details. "Jesus Christ," Diana Rowe muttered under her breath as she reviewed photographs of General Leonard Shaw with presidents, foreign dignitaries, and military leaders from allied nations. "This man has briefed NATO commanders and advised Congress on classified military strategy, and some local cop thinks he's a fake?" Chief Vincent Baylor was enjoying what he thought would be a routine Tuesday morning when his phone rang with a call that would haunt him for the rest of his career. He sat in his office wearing a blue jacket over his light blue police shirt, reviewing budget reports under the bright overhead lighting that illuminated his administrative workspace. The voice on the other end belonged to Mayor Roberta Chambers, and her tone suggested that his world was about to collapse. "Chief Baylor, I need you to tell me why I'm receiving phone calls from the Pentagon about one of your officers arresting a United States Army general," Mayor Roberta Chambers said, her voice tight with barely controlled fury. "Please tell me, this is some kind of mistake." Chief Vincent Baylor felt his stomach drop as he pulled up the overnight arrest reports. Detective Adrian Knox's name appeared next to a booking for impersonation of a military officer, but nothing in the paperwork suggested they had arrested anyone of actual military importance. His hands shook slightly as he scrolled through the details, seeing only the routine language Detective Adrian Knox had used to justify the arrest. "Ma'am, I'm looking at the report now," Chief Vincent Baylor stammered, his blue jacket suddenly feeling too tight. According to Detective Knox, the subject was wearing what appeared to be a fake military uniform and couldn't provide adequate identification. Chief, the Pentagon has confirmed that General Leonard Shaw is one of their most senior officers. Mayor Roberta Chambers continued, her voice rising. He has a security clearance that requires congressional notification to revoke, and your detective had him processed like a common criminal because he decided a black man couldn't possibly be a real general. The full magnitude of the disaster began dawning on Chief Vincent Baylor as he realized that Detective Adrian Knox's racial biases had potentially created a federal incident. He thought about the phone calls he would need to make, the media attention that would follow, the federal investigations that would scrutinize every aspect of his department's operations. His career flashed before his eyes as he understood that everything was about to change. Detective Adrian Knox, meanwhile, continued his shift in blissful ignorance of the federal machinery grinding into motion against him. He sat at his desk, wearing a short-sleeved police uniform, typing up supplementary reports and joking with other officers about the morning's arrest. The bright fluorescent lighting in the detective bureau illuminated his satisfied expression as he basked in what he believed was a job well done. "I'm telling you, Martinez, this guy was good," Detective Adrian Knox bragged to a nearby officer. "Full dress uniform, fake medals, the whole 9 yards. But I could tell he was a fraud from 50 feet away. These people think they can fool everyone with their costumes and act like they deserve respect." What Detective Adrian Knox couldn't see was the storm of federal activity his actions had unleashed. Back at the Pentagon, General Frances Loomis was making phone calls that would reverberate through the highest levels of government. Her red blazer remained pristine as she worked the phones with military efficiency, but her expression grew harder with each conversation. "Mr. Attorney General, this is General Loomis at the Pentagon," she said into her secure line. "I need to brief you on a situation that requires immediate federal intervention. One of our most senior field commanders has been unlawfully arrested by local police in what appears to be a racially motivated incident." The social media dimension of the crisis was developing simultaneously as footage of General Leonard Shaw's arrest began spreading across every platform. Bystanders who had recorded the incident were uploading videos that showed a distinguished-looking black man in an immaculate military dress uniform being handcuffed despite his calm attempts to reason with Detective Adrian Knox. The contrast between General Leonard Shaw's dignity and Detective Adrian Knox's aggressive behavior was stark and undeniable. Colonel Howard Ramsey monitored the online response from his Pentagon office, watching as hashtags related to the incident began trending nationwide. His green military dress shirt remained sharp as he coordinated with multiple agencies, but his expression reflected the gravity of watching a decorated general being humiliated in viral videos that were being viewed by millions of Americans. The military's institutional response was swift and comprehensive. General Frances Loomis activated emergency protocols that hadn't been used since terrorist attacks on military installations. Her red blazer moved purposefully as she strode through Pentagon corridors, gathering the resources necessary to protect one of their own and demonstrate that attacks on military personnel would not be tolerated. "This isn't just about General Shaw," General Frances Loomis explained to her assembled staff in the brightly lit conference room. "This is about whether a police officer can humiliate a senior military commander based on racial prejudice and face no consequences. If we don't respond decisively, we're telling every service member that their uniform means nothing when confronted by civilian bigotry." FBI agent Diana Rowe was already en route to the police station, her red pantsuit perfectly pressed as she reviewed General Leonard Shaw's file during the flight. The classified nature of his service record meant that most of the officers who had processed him had no idea they were dealing with a man who had helped shape American military policy for decades. His knowledge of state secrets alone made his mistreatment a potential security issue requiring federal oversight. As the various federal agencies coordinated their response, Detective Adrian Knox continued his paperwork, still unaware that his career was about to end in spectacular fashion. The bright police station lighting illuminated his satisfied expression as he contemplated what he believed was successful law enforcement. He had no idea that generals, FBI agents, mayors, and federal prosecutors were discussing his future with the kind of attention usually reserved for national security threats. The momentum was building toward a confrontation that would expose not just Detective Adrian Knox's individual prejudices, but the systemic failures that had allowed such behavior to flourish unchecked. General Leonard Shaw sat in his cell with the quiet confidence of a man who knew that justice, while sometimes delayed, was inexorable when backed by the full weight of federal authority. The wheels of justice were turning, and Detective Adrian Knox was about to discover that attacking America's military leadership carried consequences he never could have imagined. The late morning sun cast sharp shadows across the police station parking lot as FBI agent Diana Rowe stepped out of her black sedan, her red blazer and black slacks, creating a stark professional silhouette against the concrete building. Her leather briefcase contained federal warrants and documentation that would transform this small-town police department into the center of a national civil rights investigation. Diana's green eyes were focused and determined as she approached the main entrance, knowing that her arrival would send shockwaves through the department's hierarchy. Chief Vincent Baylor paced frantically in his office, his orange polo shirt damp with perspiration despite the air conditioning humming overhead. The fluorescent lights buzzed incessantly as he stared at his phone, which had been ringing non-stop for the past hour. First the Pentagon, then the FBI, followed by the mayor's office and 3 different media outlets. The magnitude of Detective Adrian Knox's arrest was becoming clearer with each call, and Vincent felt his career slipping away with every ringtone. Chief Baylor, his secretary's voice crackled through the intercom. FBI agent Diana Rowe is here to see you. She has federal documentation. Vincent's stomach dropped as he loosened his blue jacket and tried to compose himself. Send her in immediately. Diana entered the office with the commanding presence of someone who had handled dozens of federal investigations. Her red blazer was perfectly pressed, and she carried herself with the authority that came from representing the full power of federal law enforcement. She placed her briefcase on Vincent's desk and opened it with practiced precision. Chief Baylor, I'm FBI agent Diana Rowe. I'm here to inform you that this department is now under federal investigation for potential civil rights violations. Diana's voice was crisp and professional as she handed him the official documentation. We have credible evidence that one of your officers, Detective Adrian Knox, may have engaged in a pattern of racially motivated arrests and misconduct. Vincent's hands trembled slightly as he reviewed the federal warrants. The overhead fluorescent lighting seemed harsher now, illuminating every detail of the documents that spelled potential disaster for his department. Agent Rowe, I want to assure you that this department fully cooperates with all federal investigations. If there have been any improprieties, we will address them immediately. I need immediate access to Detective Knox's arrest records, body camera footage, and personnel files, Diana stated, her green top visible beneath her unbuttoned red blazer. I also need to interview the officer currently in custody and any witnesses to today's incident. Meanwhile, in the main corridor, Detective Adrian Knox was finally learning about the federal response to his actions. Officer Shannon Voss approached him near the evidence room, her expression grave as she delivered the news that would shatter his confidence. Knox, you need to know that the FBI is here, Shannon said, her red shirt and dark pants making her appear official and serious under the bright ceiling lights. They're investigating your arrest of that man in the military uniform. Word is spreading that he might actually be a real general. Adrian's face flushed red with anger and disbelief. His short-sleeved police uniform suddenly felt constraining as adrenaline coursed through his system. That's impossible, Shannon. I've been a cop for 15 years. I know a fraud when I see one. That guy is running the most elaborate con I've ever encountered. The Pentagon confirmed his identity. Adrian, Shannon pressed, her voice dropping to a whisper. Colonel Howard Ramsey personally vouched for him. The FBI agent is reviewing all your recent arrests. Adrian's jaw clenched as he processed this information. His years of unchecked authority had created a mindset where admitting error seemed impossible. I don't care if the president himself calls. That man in the cell is impersonating a military officer, and I'm going to prove it. In the holding area, General Leonard Shaw sat with perfect military posture despite the uncomfortable metal bench. His dress uniform remained pristine, the rows of ribbons and medals catching the overhead light as he maintained the dignity that had defined his 30-year career. Dr. Carlton Briggs sat across from him, his green shirt and blue jacket giving him a professional appearance as he continued their conversation. "General Shaw, your knowledge of military protocol and classified operations is beyond what any impersonator could fabricate," Carlton said, his voice filled with professional respect. "Your demeanor, your bearing, even the way you address military time and chain of command protocols, everything confirms your authenticity." Leonard's dark eyes reflected both gratitude and concern. "Dr. Briggs, I appreciate your professional assessment. However, my greater concern is that Detective Knox's behavior suggests a pattern that has likely affected other innocent people. This situation transcends my personal circumstances." Back in Chief Baylor's office, Diana had begun her systematic review of Detective Knox's arrest records. Her laptop screen displayed a disturbing pattern as she scrolled through months of data, the fluorescent office lighting providing perfect visibility for her analysis. "Chief Baylor, I'm seeing a troubling trend in Detective Knox's arrests," Diana announced, her fingers clicking across the keyboard. "In the past 18 months, 68% of his arrests involved African American suspects, despite your district's demographics showing a much more diverse population." Vincent leaned over to view the screen, his orange shirt straining against his expanding midsection as stress eating over recent months took its toll. The data was undeniable, presented in charts and graphs that painted a clear picture of racial bias. Furthermore, Diana continued, Detective Knox's use of force reports showed disproportionate aggressive tactics when dealing with black suspects compared to white arrestees in similar circumstances. At that moment, Colonel Howard Ramsey's voice echoed through the station as he entered with General Francis Loomis. Both officers wore dress uniforms, their muscular builds and commanding presence immediately shifting the atmosphere throughout the building. The natural skylight streaming through the main windows highlighted their polished medals and insignia, announcing their high-ranking status to everyone present. "I want to speak with whoever is in charge of this travesty," General Francis Loomis announced, her voice carrying the authority of someone accustomed to commanding thousands of troops. Her dress uniform was immaculate, and her bearing left no doubt about her position in the military hierarchy. Captain Lucia Delgado emerged from her office, her red blouse and black slacks complementing her professional demeanor as she approached the military officials. "General, I'm Captain Delgado. We're fully cooperating with the federal investigation and working to resolve this situation immediately." "Captain, one of the Army's most decorated generals is sitting in your jail cell because your detective refused to verify his credentials," Francis stated firmly. "This is not just a local police matter. This is a federal incident involving military personnel." Colonel Howard's presence was equally commanding as he stepped forward, his muscular frame filling out his dress uniform perfectly. "We need General Shaw released for immediate medical evaluation and debriefing. His arrest has triggered emergency protocols at the highest levels of military command." Meanwhile, Adrian Knox approached the group of officials, his confidence wavering, but his defiance still intact. His short-sleeved uniform looked shabby compared to the immaculate military dress uniform surrounding him. "I'm Detective Knox, and I stand by my arrest," he announced, his voice slightly shaky but determined. "That man has created an elaborate impersonation scheme, and I won't be fooled by fake military personnel trying to intimidate me." The silence that followed Adrian's statement was deafening. General Francis Loomis turned toward him with an expression that had intimidated enemy commanders and insubordinate soldiers throughout her career. "Detective Knox, you have arrested General Leonard Shaw, a man who has served this country with distinction for 3 decades. Francis said, her voice carrying the weight of absolute authority. "He has led classified operations that you lack the security clearance to even know exist." Agent Diana Rowe approached the group, her red blazer making her immediately recognizable as she carried additional documentation. "Detective Knox, I need to interview you regarding your arrest patterns and procedures. My preliminary investigation has raised serious questions about your conduct." Adrian's face flushed as he realized the scope of the forces aligning against him. "I want my union representative present for any questioning." "That's your right," Diana replied professionally. "However, I should inform you that this investigation now involves potential federal civil rights violations, which carry significant penalties. Captain Lucia Delgado stepped forward, her red blouse vibrant under the station's bright lighting. "Detective Knox, you're hereby suspended from active duty, pending the outcome of this federal investigation. Turn in your badge and weapon immediately." The color drained from Adrian's face as the reality of his situation finally began penetrating his defensive denial. His 15-year career was crumbling around him, and the federal investigation would likely uncover aspects of his conduct that he had never expected to be scrutinized. In the holding area, more evidence of Adrian's misconduct was emerging. Sergeant Mildred Horton had been quietly reviewing previous arrest reports, her red cardigan and reading glasses giving her a grandmotherly appearance that belied her sharp investigative instincts. "Agent Rowe," Mildred called out as Diana passed through the area, "I've been reviewing Detective Knox's recent arrests, and there are disturbing patterns. 3 other cases in the past 6 months involved black professionals who claimed they were racially profiled." Diana took the files, her green eyes scanning the reports under the bright overhead lighting. Each case showed similarities to General Shaw's situation. Successful African-American individuals stopped or arrested under questionable circumstances, their credentials dismissed or ignored by Detective Knox. "Have any of these individuals filed complaints?" Diana asked. 2 of them tried, but their complaints were minimized or dismissed. Mildred admitted, her voice showing regret. "I should have pushed harder for investigations." But Detective Knox had support from certain supervisors. General Leonard Shaw was finally brought to an interview room where Agent Diana Rowe could speak with him directly. The room's fluorescent lighting provided perfect visibility as Leonard maintained his military bearing despite hours of unjust incarceration. "General Shaw, I'm FBI Agent Diana Rowe, and I want to apologize on behalf of federal law enforcement for the treatment you've received," Diana began, her red blazer and professional demeanor conveying both authority and respect. Leonard's response demonstrated the grace that had defined his character throughout the ordeal. "Agent Rowe, while I appreciate your concern for my personal situation, my greater worry is for other individuals who may have faced similar treatment without the resources or connections to defend themselves." Diana nodded, recognizing the exceptional character of the man sitting before her. "General, your case has opened our eyes to a pattern of misconduct that we intend to investigate thoroughly. Your dignity throughout this ordeal is remarkable." As the afternoon progressed, more victims of Adrian's racial profiling began emerging. A black attorney contacted the station after seeing news reports, describing a similar stop where his credentials were dismissed. A successful businessman came forward with body camera footage that showed Adrian using racial slurs during a traffic stop. Chief Vincent Baylor realized that his department faced a crisis that would require comprehensive reforms and accountability measures. His orange shirt was now completely soaked with perspiration as he watched his career and department's reputation crumble under federal scrutiny. The investigation was expanding beyond a single incident to reveal systematic problems that had been ignored or covered up for years. Detective Adrian Knox's defiant attitude had triggered a federal response that would transform not just his career, but potentially influence law enforcement practices nationwide. As evening approached, General Leonard Shaw remained calm in custody, knowing that justice was finally mobilizing. His quiet dignity and professional bearing had impressed everyone who interacted with him, creating a stark contrast to Detective Knox's increasingly desperate attempts to justify his actions. The federal investigation was just beginning, but already the scope of Detective Knox's misconduct was becoming clear. Agent Diana Rowe had uncovered evidence that would ensure justice was served and reforms were implemented to prevent future incidents. The wheels of federal justice were now turning, and nothing Detective Adrian Knox could say or do would stop the accountability that was coming his way. The morning sun cast sharp shadows across the police station parking lot as 3 black SUVs with government plates pulled up in perfect formation. From the lead vehicle emerged General Frances Loomis, her green uniform jacket, pristine, and her silver stars gleaming under the fluorescent lights of the station entrance. Behind her, Colonel Howard Ramsey adjusted his orange military shirt beneath his blue jacket, his jaw set with barely contained fury. 6 military police officers in muscular builds flanked them, their long-sleeved uniforms bearing the insignia of Pentagon security detail. Inside the station, Chief Vincent Baylor paced behind his desk, sweat beading on his forehead. Despite the air conditioning, the phone hadn't stopped ringing since dawn, each call bringing worse news about the political firestorm Detective Adrian Knox had ignited. When his secretary announced the Pentagon delegation's arrival, Baylor's hands trembled as he straightened his tie. Detective Adrian Knox sat in the break room, still wearing his short-sleeved uniform shirt from the previous day, completely oblivious to the storm approaching. He sipped coffee and joked with Officer Patterson about the crazy general wannabe still sitting and holding. His racist commentary continued unabated, each word sealing his fate more completely. The station's main doors burst open with military precision. General Frances Loomis strode through the lobby, her presence commanding instant attention from every officer present. The conversations died mid-sentence as 60 years of military authority filled the space. Sergeant Mildred Horton, wearing her regulation red blouse, stood immediately and saluted by instinct. "I am General Frances Loomis, Joint Chiefs of Staff." Her voice cut through the silence like a blade. "I'm here to retrieve one of America's most decorated officers, who has been illegally detained by this department." Chief Vincent Baylor emerged from his office, his face pale and his hands shaking. "General Loomis, I want to assure you that we're conducting a full investigation into this incident. Detective Knox acted without proper authority, and we're prepared to make this right immediately." Colonel Howard Ramsey stepped forward, his muscular frame imposing in the harsh station lighting. "Chief Baylor, General Leonard Shaw has been held for over 18 hours without cause. This is not just a local matter anymore. This is a federal incident with national security implications." In the holding area, General Leonard Shaw sat on the narrow bench, his dress uniform still immaculate despite the night in custody. He had maintained perfect military posture throughout his detention, never allowing Detective Knox's treatment to break his dignity. When he heard familiar voices echoing from the main station, he stood and smoothed his jacket, preparing for whatever came next. FBI agent Diana Rowe appeared from the records room, carrying a thick folder of Detective Knox's arrest files. Her investigation had revealed a pattern so disturbing that federal prosecutors were already preparing charges. She approached the Pentagon delegation with grim determination written across her face. "General Loomis, I've been investigating Detective Knox's conduct for the past 6 hours. What we've found goes far beyond yesterday's arrest. There's a documented pattern of racial profiling, targeting black professionals, military personnel, and business owners. Your general isn't Knox's first victim. He's just the most high profile." The words hung in the air like an indictment. Chief Baylor's face went from pale to ashen as he realized the scope of the liability facing his department. The federal investigation would expose years of misconduct that had been ignored or covered up. Detective Adrian Knox finally appeared, summoned by his sergeant with urgent whispers about important visitors. He swaggered into the main area, still confident in his authority, completely unprepared for the scene awaiting him. When he saw the military delegation, his first instinct was mockery. "Oh great, more people playing dress-up." Knox laughed, his racist arrogance on full display. "Let me guess, you're here about the con artist in holding. Guy's got quite the imagination, I'll give him that." The silence that followed was deafening. General Frances Loomis turned slowly to face Detective Knox, her eyes containing decades of command authority and barely restrained fury. Colonel Howard Ramsey stepped protectively closer to his superior, his muscular frame tense with controlled anger. "Detective Knox," FBI agent Diana Rowe's voice was ice-cold professional. "You're being placed on immediate administrative suspension, pending federal investigation into civil rights violations, abuse of power, and violation of federal statutes. Your badge and weapon, now." The color drained from Knox's face as reality began penetrating his wall of arrogance. "Wait, what? You can't be serious. I was just doing my job." That guy was clearly impersonating an officer. That guy, General Frances Loomis, stepped forward, her voice carrying the weight of absolute authority, "is General Leonard Shaw, recipient of the Distinguished Service Cross, Silver Star and Bronze Star. He has 30 years of distinguished service to this nation, including classified operations you couldn't begin to comprehend, and you treated him like a criminal based solely on the color of his skin. Outside, news vans began arriving as word of the story leaked to the media. Reporters and camera crews set up on the sidewalk, sensing the magnitude of the developing story. Social media had exploded overnight with videos of the arrest, and the hashtag General Shaw Justice was trending nationally. Chief Vincent Baylor realized his department was about to become the center of a national scandal. Detective Knox, you're suspended immediately. Security will escort you from the building. General Loomis, please accept my formal apology for this unconscionable treatment of General Shaw. We will cooperate fully with any federal investigation. Colonel Howard Ramsey wasn't satisfied with apologies. Chief, this isn't just about one officer's misconduct. This represents a systemic failure of leadership and accountability. How many other decorated veterans have been subjected to this treatment? How many other citizens have been targeted based on racial bias? FBI agent Diana Rowe opened her thick folder, revealing months of documentation. Our preliminary investigation shows Detective Knox has made over 200 stops in the past 2 years, with an 87% targeting rate of Black and Hispanic individuals. Vehicle searches, credential challenges, and aggressive questioning follow clear racial patterns. The enormity of the evidence was staggering. Each statistic represented a person humiliated, a family traumatized, a community member treated as inherently suspicious. Detective Knox's individual racism had become institutional discrimination through official indifference. A commotion outside announced the arrival of Mayor Roberta Chambers, her red power suit visible through the station windows as she pushed through the growing crowd of reporters. Her city was about to face national scrutiny, and damage control was already too late. We need to see General Shaw immediately, General Francis Loomis demanded. He requires medical evaluation after this ordeal, and he has a ceremony to attend that your officer's bigotry has already delayed. Sergeant Mildred Horton led the delegation to the holding area, her keys jangling nervously as she unlocked the cell. General Leonard Shaw stood at attention, his bearings still perfect despite hours of unjust imprisonment. When he saw General Francis Loomis, he snapped a crisp salute. General Shaw. Francis Loomis returned the salute with deep respect. On behalf of the United States military and every service member you've led, I apologize for this disgraceful treatment. Your dignity under these circumstances reflects the highest traditions of our armed forces. Thank you, General. Leonard Shaw's voice remained steady and professional. While I appreciate your intervention, I hope this incident can serve a purpose beyond my personal vindication. If my experience can prevent others from facing similar injustice, then perhaps some good can come from this ordeal. Even in vindication, General Shaw's first thought was for others who might suffer similar treatment. His response exemplified the leadership qualities that had earned him 3 decades of military recognition and the respect of subordinates across all racial lines. Detective Knox watched helplessly as his authority evaporated. His union representative, Jerry Costello, arrived carrying a briefcase and wearing a grim expression. The union's initial response had been standard defense protocols, but as evidence mounted, even labor protection had limits. Jerry, thank God you're here. Knox grabbed his representative's arm. These people are trying to railroad me over doing my job. The guy looked suspicious, and I followed proper procedures. Costello reviewed the preliminary evidence FBI agent Diana Rowe provided, his expression growing more troubled with each page. Video footage, witness statements, and documented patterns painted a picture no defense strategy could overcome. Adrian, I need you to listen carefully. Costello's voice carried no encouragement. This isn't a standard misconduct case. You're facing federal civil rights charges, potential hate crime enhancements, and civil liability from multiple victims. The union can provide representation, but we can't defend the indefensible. Outside, Mayor Roberta Chambers approached a forest of microphones and cameras, her red suit blazing under the television lights. The national media had descended like locusts, sensing a story that would dominate news cycles for weeks. Ladies and gentlemen, I want to address the unconscionable treatment of General Leonard Shaw by our police department. Detective Knox acted without authority and contrary to our department's values and training. We are implementing immediate reforms and cooperating fully with federal investigators to ensure this never happens again. The questions came like machine gun fire. How long had Knox's pattern continued? What oversight failures allowed this behavior? How many other victims were there? Each inquiry peeled back another layer of institutional responsibility and systemic breakdown. Inside the station, General Leonard Shaw emerged from the holding area. His uniform still pristine despite his ordeal. Officers throughout the station stopped their work to stare, many seeing for the first time the authentic military bearing and decorations Detective Knox had dismissed as costume jewelry. General Shaw, Chief Baylor, approached with obvious discomfort. I want to personally apologize for Detective Knox's actions and assure you that we will implement comprehensive reforms to prevent future incidents. Leonard Shaw studied the chief's face, measuring sincerity against political calculation. Chief Baylor, apologies are appreciated, but systemic change requires more than words. The question is whether this department has the commitment to examine its practices honestly and implement meaningful accountability measures. FBI agent Diana Rowe stepped forward with her completed preliminary report. General Shaw, we've documented extensive evidence of Detective Knox's discriminatory practices. Would you be willing to cooperate with our federal investigation to ensure comprehensive justice for all his victims? Absolutely, Shaw nodded without hesitation. If my experience can help build a case that prevents others from suffering similar treatment, I consider that a continuation of my service to this country. The contrast was striking. General Shaw, the victim of injustice, remained focused on helping others and improving systems. Detective Knox, the perpetrator, remained focused on avoiding consequences and defending his actions. Colonel Howard Ramsey coordinated with the military police detail to escort General Shaw to Fort Braxton for medical evaluation and preparation for his delayed ceremony. The Pentagon had already issued statements supporting their decorated officer and promising cooperation with all investigations. As the Pentagon delegation prepared to leave, Detective Knox made one final attempt to salvage his position. This is all political correctness run amok. I was protecting this community from potential threats. Nobody wants to admit that crime has patterns, and those patterns involve certain demographics. His words sealed his fate completely. FBI agent Diana Rowe added the comments to her evidence file, while Chief Baylor realized that Knox's continued racism eliminated any possibility of rehabilitation or reduced consequences. General Frances Loomis paused at the station door, her final words carrying the weight of institutional power and moral authority. Detective Knox, you took an oath to protect and serve all citizens equally. Instead, you used your badge to terrorize law-abiding Americans based on racial prejudice. Your actions dishonor every officer who truly serves their community with integrity. The reckoning was complete. General Leonard Shaw walked out of the police station with his dignity intact and his honor restored, while Detective Adrian Knox faced the collapse of his career and the weight of federal justice. Outside, the media captured every moment as General Shaw paused to address the nation, his words destined to become a defining moment in the ongoing struggle for justice and equality in America. 3 days after General Leonard Shaw's release, FBI agent Diana Rowe sat in her temporary office at the federal courthouse, reviewing the mountain of evidence against Detective Adrian Knox. Her green blouse caught the fluorescent lighting as she organized witness statements, body camera footage, and civil rights violation documentation. The case had grown exponentially beyond a single wrongful arrest into a comprehensive investigation of systematic misconduct spanning Detective Adrian Knox's entire career. Detective Adrian Knox arrived at the courthouse, flanked by his attorney, his usual swagger replaced by visible anxiety. His short-sleeved police uniform had been traded for an ill-fitting gray suit and blue tie, but his arrogance remained intact despite the overwhelming evidence against him. FBI agent Diana Rowe had meticulously documented 17 separate incidents of racial profiling over the past 5 years, each supported by body camera footage that Detective Adrian Knox had assumed would never be scrutinized. The federal courthouse buzzed with activity as multiple victims of Detective Adrian Knox's misconduct arrived to provide testimony. Marcus Washington, a black surgeon, testified about being pulled over and questioned for driving through an upscale neighborhood while wearing scrubs. Detective Adrian Knox had demanded proof of employment and searched his vehicle without cause, assuming the medical professional was involved in drug activity. The body camera footage showed Detective Adrian Knox using derogatory language and refusing to accept Dr. Washington's hospital identification as legitimate. Meanwhile, at Fort Braxton, General Leonard Shaw stood before his peers in the base conference room, receiving formal apologies from military leadership. Colonel Howard Ramsey wore his dress uniform with long sleeves as he presented General Leonard Shaw with official documentation acknowledging the injustice he had endured. General Frances Loomis addressed the assembled officers, her red blazer and blue skirt reflecting her authority, as she outlined new protocols for supporting military personnel who face civilian discrimination. General Leonard Shaw listened with characteristic dignity as the base commander announced comprehensive policy reviews triggered by his arrest. The military would now provide immediate legal support for service members facing wrongful detention, establish direct communication channels with civilian law enforcement, and create rapid response protocols when military personnel are mistreated by local authorities. General Leonard Shaw's ordeal had exposed dangerous gaps in protection for uniformed service members, gaps that would now be closed through systematic reform. Back at the police station, Chief Vincent Baylor faced reporters in his blue jacket and orange shirt, announcing sweeping departmental changes designed to prevent future incidents of racial profiling. The overhead fluorescent lighting illuminated his grim expression as he outlined mandatory bias training, enhanced accountability measures, and community oversight programs. Body cameras would now be required for all interactions, with severe penalties for officers who failed to activate recording equipment during stops and arrests. Detective Adrian Knox's misconduct had been so extensive that Chief Vincent Baylor found himself implementing the most comprehensive reforms in the department's history. Each of Detective Adrian Knox's arrests over the past 3 years would undergo federal review, with particular attention to stops involving black professionals, veterans, and community leaders. The pattern of discrimination was so clear that federal investigators had classified the police department as requiring ongoing monitoring to ensure compliance with civil rights laws. Lieutenant Curtis Payne stood before the police review board, his long-sleeved uniform crisp, under the natural skylight streaming through the courthouse windows. His testimony about questioning Detective Adrian Knox's arrest of General Leonard Shaw had positioned him as a key witness in the federal investigation. Lieutenant Curtis Payne's integrity and willingness to speak truth to power earned him commendation from Chief Vincent Baylor and recognition from federal investigators as an example of proper police conduct. FBI agent Diana Rowe presented her findings to the federal prosecutor, her evidence organized into categories that painted a devastating picture of Detective Adrian Knox's career: traffic stops without probable cause, searches conducted without warrants, and a pattern of targeting black professionals who Detective Adrian Knox assumed didn't belong in certain neighborhoods or professions. The body camera evidence was particularly damning, showing Detective Adrian Knox making racist comments and dismissing legitimate identification from his victims. Dr. Carlton Briggs provided expert testimony about the psychological profile of authentic military leadership, contrasting General Leonard Shaw's genuine command presence with the aggressive behavior patterns displayed by Detective Adrian Knox. His professional assessment confirmed that anyone with military experience would have immediately recognized General Leonard Shaw's authentic bearing and extensive service record. Detective Adrian Knox's refusal to acknowledge obvious evidence revealed either profound ignorance or willful discrimination. The civil lawsuits against Detective Adrian Knox began piling up as his victims found courage to come forward. Each case represented a life disrupted by racial profiling, a career questioned, a family humiliated by discriminatory law enforcement practices. The city faced millions in potential damages, costs that would ultimately be borne by taxpayers who deserved better from their public servants. Detective Adrian Knox's misconduct had created financial liability that would impact municipal budgets for years to come. General Leonard Shaw returned to his duties at Fort Braxton, where his colleagues treated him with the respect his rank and service record demanded. The contrast with his treatment by Detective Adrian Knox couldn't have been starker. Military personnel understood chain of command, respect for authority, and the significance of decades of distinguished service. General Leonard Shaw's office filled with flowers, commendations, and messages of support from service members across all branches who had followed his story in military publications. The media coverage of Detective Adrian Knox's downfall intensified as reporters discovered additional evidence of misconduct. Local news stations featured interviews with his victims, each story revealing another instance of racial profiling and abuse of power. Detective Adrian Knox had systematically targeted black professionals, assuming their success was illegitimate and their presence in upscale areas was suspicious. His misconduct had damaged community trust and created lasting trauma for numerous families. FBI agent Diana Rowe's investigation expanded beyond Detective Adrian Knox to examine departmental culture and supervision failures. How had such extensive misconduct gone undetected? Why hadn't body camera footage been reviewed? What training and oversight mechanisms had failed so completely? The federal investigation revealed systematic problems that required comprehensive solutions, not just individual accountability for Detective Adrian Knox's actions. Chief Vincent Baylor announced the creation of a community oversight board with authority to review police conduct and recommend disciplinary action. The board would include community leaders, civil rights advocates, and military veterans who understood the respect owed to service members. General Leonard Shaw's case had demonstrated the need for external oversight when internal police review processes failed to identify and address discriminatory conduct. Officer Shannon Voss, who had witnessed Detective Adrian Knox's arrest of General Leonard Shaw, provided crucial testimony about the atmosphere of intimidation that prevented officers from challenging misconduct. Her red uniform blouse stood out in the courtroom as she described how Detective Adrian Knox's aggressive personality and political connections within the department had created a culture of silence. Officers who questioned his methods faced retaliation and career consequences, enabling his discriminatory behavior to continue unchecked. The federal prosecutor announced formal charges against Detective Adrian Knox, including civil rights violations under federal law, false imprisonment, abuse of power, and conspiracy to deprive citizens of constitutional rights. Each charge carried significant prison time, and the evidence was so overwhelming that plea negotiations focused on sentence reduction rather than innocence claims. Detective Adrian Knox's career in law enforcement was permanently over, his pension forfeited, and his future prospects severely limited by felony convictions. General Leonard Shaw's impact extended far beyond his individual case, as military and civilian leaders recognized the broader implications of his treatment. His dignity under pressure, his refusal to respond with anger or hatred, and his focus on systematic reform rather than personal revenge had elevated him to national prominence as a symbol of grace under fire. Speaking engagements poured in from universities, civic organizations, and law enforcement agencies seeking his perspective on building community trust. Lieutenant Curtis Payne received official recognition for his integrity and moral courage in questioning Detective Adrian Knox's arrest, despite potential career consequences. His willingness to speak truth to power served as an example for other officers who witnessed misconduct but feared retaliation. Chief Vincent Baylor promoted Lieutenant Curtis Payne and assigned him to lead the department's new Community Relations Division, where his integrity would help rebuild trust damaged by Detective Adrian Knox's actions. The consequences of Detective Adrian Knox's misconduct rippled through the criminal justice system as prosecutors reviewed his previous cases for evidence of tainted investigations and false testimony. Convictions based on his arrests faced potential appeals, creating additional costs and undermining public confidence in law enforcement. His actions had damaged not just his victims, but the entire system of justice that depended on police credibility and professional conduct. As the chapter closed, Detective Adrian Knox faced the complete destruction of his career and reputation, while General Leonard Shaw emerged as a symbol of dignity and reform. The contrast between their fates demonstrated that character ultimately determines destiny, and that those who abuse power eventually face accountability for their actions. 6 months had passed since that fateful morning when Detective Adrian Knox arrested General Leonard Shaw in broad daylight. The autumn sun streamed through the tall windows of the federal courthouse as Judge Patricia Morrison delivered the verdict that would echo through law enforcement agencies nationwide. Detective Adrian Knox stood rigid in his Orange County jail jumpsuit, his once arrogant demeanor replaced by hollow resignation as the words fell like hammer blows. On the charge of deprivation of rights under color of law, we find the defendant guilty. On the charge of conspiracy against rights, we find the defendant guilty. On the charge of obstruction of justice, we find the defendant guilty. The courtroom remained silent as Judge Morrison continued reading the verdicts on all 14 federal charges. FBI agent Diana Rowe, seated in the front row, wearing her crisp green blouse and dark blue jacket, watched with professional satisfaction as justice finally caught up with Detective Adrian Knox. Her investigation had uncovered a pattern of misconduct spanning 8 years, affecting dozens of victims who had suffered under his badge. Detective Adrian Knox's hands trembled slightly as Judge Morrison pronounced his sentence. The court sentences you to 7 years in federal prison, followed by 3 years of supervised release. Your actions as a sworn officer of the law were a betrayal of public trust and a stain on the badge you wore. This sentence reflects the gravity of your crimes against the citizens you were sworn to protect. As the bailiff approached with handcuffs, Detective Adrian Knox's eyes swept the courtroom one final time. The faces staring back at him told the story of his downfall. 17 of his victims sat in the gallery, their presence a powerful testament to the harm he had inflicted through years of racial profiling and abuse of power. Among them sat Marcus Williams, the black business owner Detective Adrian Knox had arrested for suspicious behavior while depositing checks at his own bank. There was Dr. Angela Foster, the pediatrician he had stopped 7 times in 2 years, always claiming she matched a suspect description. Each face represented a life he had disrupted, a dignity he had trampled, a trust he had shattered. The courthouse steps buzzed with media activity as news crews captured the historic moment. Reporter Jennifer Hayes addressed her camera with barely contained excitement. Today marks the end of a case that has sparked nationwide police reform. Detective Adrian Knox, the officer who falsely arrested decorated Army General Leonard Shaw 6 months ago, has been sentenced to 7 years in federal prison. But perhaps more importantly, this case has become a catalyst for change that extends far beyond one corrupt officer. 300 miles away at Fort Braxton, General Leonard Shaw stood in his impeccably pressed dress uniform, the morning sunlight catching the gleam of his medals and ribbons. The ceremony taking place in the main auditorium would have seemed impossible 6 months ago when he sat in a jail cell, but today felt like the natural conclusion of a journey toward justice. General Frances Loomis approached the podium, her voice carrying across the packed auditorium filled with military personnel, government officials, and community leaders. Today we honor not just a distinguished military career, but a man whose response to injustice has inspired reform across our nation. General Leonard Shaw faced hatred with dignity, met ignorance with wisdom, and answered persecution with a call for justice that has been heard in the highest offices of our government. The Distinguished Public Service Award gleamed in General Frances Loomis's hands as she continued. This recognition comes not from the Pentagon alone, but jointly from the Department of Defense, the Department of Justice, and the White House. General Shaw, your grace under pressure and commitment to positive change have exemplified the highest values of military service and American citizenship. As General Leonard Shaw stepped forward to accept the award, the auditorium erupted in sustained applause. His wife Martha, elegant in her red dress, wiped tears from her eyes as she watched her husband receive recognition that seemed inadequate for what he had endured and accomplished. Colonel Howard Ramsey led the standing ovation, his pride evident as he watched his colleague receive the honor he so richly deserved. General Leonard Shaw's acceptance speech resonated with the quiet power that had carried him through 6 months of public scrutiny and federal investigations. This award represents more than personal recognition. It symbolizes our nation's commitment to the principle that justice delayed is not justice denied. The changes we've seen in law enforcement training, accountability measures, and community oversight prove that even the darkest moments can illuminate the path toward a brighter future. The transformation within the police department, where Detective Adrian Knox had once worked, represented one of the most comprehensive reforms in modern law enforcement history. Chief Vincent Baylor, who had initially tried to minimize the incident, now found himself leading a department that had become a national model for police accountability. The mandatory bias training programs developed in partnership with civil rights organizations had been implemented in over 200 departments nationwide. Captain Lucia Delgado, promoted to deputy chief following her ethical handling of the Shaw case, addressed a conference room full of police supervisors. Her red uniform shirt bore new insignia reflecting her elevated rank and expanded responsibilities. The Shaw protocols we've implemented aren't just policy changes. They represent a fundamental shift in how we approach community policing. Every traffic stop, every arrest, every interaction with the public is now viewed through the lens of respect, accountability, and constitutional rights. The body camera requirements had eliminated the culture of silence that once protected officers like Detective Adrian Knox. Lieutenant Curtis Payne, who had questioned the Shaw arrest from the beginning, now served as head of the Internal Affairs Division, ensuring that concerns raised by officers were investigated thoroughly and transparently. His integrity during the Shaw incident had earned him respect throughout the department and positioned him as a leader in the reform movement. FBI agent Diana Rowe's investigation had expanded far beyond Detective Adrian Knox's individual crimes. Her detailed analysis of arrest patterns, traffic stop data, and complaint records had revealed systemic issues that demanded federal intervention. Speaking to a congressional subcommittee on police reform, she wore her professional green blouse and blue jacket as she outlined the scope of the problem and the solutions that had emerged from the Shaw case. Our investigation identified 47 separate incidents of racial profiling by Detective Knox alone, affecting citizens from all walks of life. But more importantly, we discovered that departments with proper oversight, training, and accountability measures showed dramatically lower rates of civil rights violations. General Shaw's case became the template for identifying and preventing discriminatory policing practices nationwide. The civil lawsuits against Detective Adrian Knox and the police department had resulted in settlements totaling over $3 million. Each victim who came forward during the federal investigation received compensation for their suffering, but more significantly, their testimonies had created an undeniable record of systematic discrimination that could never again be dismissed or ignored. Dr. Carlton Briggs, the military psychiatrist, whose expertise had first identified General Leonard Shaw's authentic credentials, had become a key consultant in developing psychological screening tools for police recruits. His assessment protocols now helped identify candidates who might be prone to discriminatory behavior, while also supporting officers who demonstrated the integrity and professionalism that communities deserved. The Shaw Foundation, established by General Leonard Shaw, with support from military and civilian leaders, had already assisted over 300 veterans who faced discrimination in their civilian lives. Operating from a modest office complex, the foundation provided legal support, counseling services, and advocacy for veterans navigating challenges related to prejudice and bias. General Leonard Shaw personally reviewed every case, ensuring that no veteran would face alone the kind of treatment he had experienced. Mayor Roberta Chambers stood before the city council, wearing her formal red blazer, as she presented the annual report on police reform initiatives. The changes implemented following the Shaw incident have resulted in a 60% decrease in civilian complaints, a 40% increase in community trust ratings, and 0 federal civil rights investigations. But perhaps most importantly, we've seen a fundamental shift in how our officers view their role in the community. The Community Oversight Board, established in the wake of General Leonard Shaw's arrest, had become a model for civilian participation in police accountability. Chaired by respected community leaders and including representatives from various ethnic and professional backgrounds, the board reviewed all use-of-force incidents, investigated civilian complaints, and recommended policy changes. Their monthly meetings drew packed audiences as citizens engaged directly with law enforcement leadership. Officer Shannon Voss, who had witnessed Detective Adrian Knox's arrest of General Leonard Shaw and courageously testified about what she observed, now served as a training instructor in the Academy's ethics program. Her account of the moral courage required to speak truth to power had become a cornerstone of the curriculum that prepared new officers for the complexities of modern policing. The final scene unfolded in the Police Academy's main classroom, where fluorescent lights illuminated rows of eager recruits in their crisp training uniforms. General Leonard Shaw stood at the podium in his dress uniform, the Distinguished Public Service Award prominently displayed on his chest alongside 3 decades of military ribbons and medals. The same uniform that Detective Adrian Knox had dismissed as a costume now commanded the respectful attention of future law enforcement officers. 6 months ago, I was arrested while walking to a ceremony much like the one where you'll receive your badges. General Leonard Shaw began, his voice carrying the authority earned through years of military leadership and personal sacrifice. The officer who arrested me saw a black man in uniform and assumed I was impersonating a soldier. He didn't see my decades of service, my commitment to our country, or my basic human dignity. He saw only his own prejudices reflected back at him. The recruits listened intently as General Leonard Shaw continued. But that moment of injustice became an opportunity for transformation. Your department, your profession, and your community have used that painful experience to build something better. The reforms you'll inherit, the oversight you'll work under, and the accountability measures you'll embrace exist because good people decided that justice delayed should not become justice denied. General Leonard Shaw's closing words resonated with the power of lived experience, transformed into wisdom. When you put on that badge, you carry the hopes of every citizen who trusts you with their safety and their rights. You carry the expectations of every community member who believes that law enforcement can be both effective and fair. Most importantly, you carry the responsibility to ensure that what happened to me never happens to anyone else on your watch. The sustained applause that followed felt different from the polite recognition typically given to guest speakers. These recruits understood that they were hearing from a man whose dignity under pressure had literally changed the trajectory of American policing. As they prepared to graduate and begin their careers, General Leonard Shaw's example would guide their understanding of what it meant to serve with honor. Detective Adrian Knox began serving his 7-year sentence in the same federal facility where white-collar criminals and corrupt officials paid their debt to society. The man who had once wielded a badge as a weapon against innocent citizens now faced the daily reality of life behind bars. His appeals had been denied, his pension revoked, and his legacy reduced to a cautionary tale about the consequences of unchecked prejudice and abuse of power. As General Leonard Shaw left the police academy that day, the autumn sun cast long shadows across the parking lot, where 6 months earlier, his arrest had sparked a national conversation about justice and accountability. The journey from that moment of humiliation to this afternoon of hope had proven that even the deepest injustices could be transformed into catalysts for positive change. The story that began with one man's dignity in the face of hatred had evolved into a nationwide movement toward fairness, accountability, and respect. Detective Adrian Knox's downfall served as a warning to those who would abuse their authority, while General Leonard Shaw's grace under pressure illuminated the path toward a more just society. You just heard a story that history tried to overlook. If it stayed with you, take a second to stand with it. Subscribe, share, and help us keep telling the stories that deserve light, not silence.